Hello and welcome to part 3 of the in-depth tutorial for setting up the demo for Inventory Cog version 1.12. In the last video, we set up the categorized UI view, and because a lot of the steps are repetitive for doing other UI views, instead of doing this live, I've gone ahead and set up everything for these two different views, and we're going to take a look at the changes that were made as a result. I've also added in a few more items and changed some stats around, but those only pertain to the demo and not so much to setting up all of the components. So let's jump right in and take a look at the changes that have been made. So if we go ahead and activate the inventory canvas, we now have three different UIs. We've got the categorized inventory. I'm going to actually name that categorized UI. List UI and RPG UI. So let's switch back to the one that we're familiar with. And if you haven't seen this again, please go back and look at tutorial number 2. So what I've added here is I've added these top level header items to each of the UIs to switch between them. And what they have is a trigger by key, which will hide the existing panel and then show the next associated panel. The other thing that it does is it calls the inventory menu UI.refresh children, and this is a very important step. If you are using multiple screens inside of your inventory, you need to call this update when changing from screen to screen. And the reason for that is when the inventory menu UI first opens, it grabs all of the active items and sets the inventory cog for them. But of course, it can't find the inactive items, so when you switch from one panel to the next, you need to do this, otherwise you're going to encounter errors. So I've done that for all three of them, and we'll jump over into the list UI. Now this is set up very similar to the grid list, except we're going to be using a item scroll list instead of an item grid scroll. And this, the item scroll list goes at the top of the scroll view instead of at the content like the grid UI does. This will automatically size your container for you, take care of making sure that the selected item is visible, things like that. It takes the same sort of item UI prefab. We've created just a different one to fit the layout that we're using. We've got this orange background for selected. We're displaying the item's name, but not the image. The white box here is our equip indicator, and on the right we have a count, which we haven't done before, so I'm going to take a look at that now. And what we did in the count was we specified this text mesh pro. The default prefix is X. You could leave it empty, or you could do open paren and close paren as a suffix. And we also hide it if the count is 1 or less. And the reason for that is obviously there's no reason to show the count if it's just 1. You can have it up there if you want. I only show it for 2 or greater. And we've got the same pointer click event so that we can select by click. The next thing we've done that's different is instead of having the modifier's current value and then what it would be if the item is equipped, what we're now doing is we're going to show the modifier's name and just the modifier value, or actually it's the targeted stat name of the modifier and the value. We're also displaying value and weight. Always, these are item values, not stat values. And we just plug them in right here, value and weight. And then just like in the previous one, we set the modifier container and the stat modifier prefab. Here's what the prefab looks like. So we've got on the left, we have the stat name, and on the right, we have the modifier value. We've also added in a sort. This is the only one of the UIs that is using sort. You can put it on any one that you want, but because the first one has categories and the third one is a drag and drop, it's really only useful for demo's sake in this particular one. So now that we've walked through what List UI is all about, let's hide everything and start the project and take a look at what the list UI looks like. So we'll start off, it comes up in the categorized view. We'll hit 2 on the keypad, or the alpha 2, not the keypad 2, that's not wired up. And we can see we can click to select all of our context sensitive menu items still appear just like in the other one, which again had to be wired up just like in categorized UI. We've still got the prefab, the preview for the item and the preview for the player. So if I hit equip here, you can see that the backpack is now on the player. I can also hit 0 to change the sort. And what I'm using for this is just a simple script that is now available to you, which is called sort UI, and we'll look at that over here. And you just select all of the different sorts that you wish to allow, whether or not you want that sort to persist. So if you set persist to true, every time you open up the inventory, it will automatically make sure that those inventory items are sorted for you and refresh the list. And of course, we have the same sort of navigation triggers. We're going to do it by key. That key is going to be alpha 0. We're going to modify this sort text. It's going to have this prefix and then the name of whatever we're sorting. Otherwise, functionally the same as category UI. And then we have the RPG UI. So you can see this also persists between the 3 different UIs. If I equip something in one, it's equipped in all. This one will take a look at what happens to it first, and then we'll look at how it's hooked up since we're already playing. On the left, we're displaying all of the different stats for the player, and we're going to have any modifiers that are applied to them on the right. And here's our full inventory minus, you can see the skins aren't here. So we've added a filter to this particular view since I don't have any location to drag and drop the skin. This mode doesn't support skin changing, so we just filter that out. These are all bound to specific equip points, so you can't drag something to a point where it's not allowed, but you can swap between multiple. So if I can do it on the left or the right, and I'm already on the left, I can move it over to the right. I can drag on my sword, and you can see also what we're doing is as soon as drag begins, if it's not already selected, we're selecting it. And that's using another trigger. So we've got the on pointer click is triggering, and then we've also got on drag begin is triggering. And just like these item equip slots, you can do the same with skills. I've opted not to have the equip indicator visible in here, but it is in normal play mode. And that was by choice. We've also added an account on this one so that you can see how many of that item you have. So yeah, we can also see, here we go, here are the modifiers that are being applied. We drag in another piece of armor, you can see our total defense has gone up, and here's all of our defense modifiers. So our base is 1, but we've added 30 with all of the different items that we've equipped. So let's take a look at how that one was set up. So first we'll look at the player stats. So this is just a stat UI list, and what it takes is the stats cog, a stat UI prefab, and then a container to put those all in, which it's using itself as the container. We'll take a look at the prefab here. And so what we have on this item is we've got a stat UI, and we've got a couple of different text mesh pros. So we're putting the stat name on the left, and then we're putting in the current value, and then we're putting in the modifier amount, and we're going to hide that item entirely if the amount is 0. We're also displaying it as an int so that the float doesn't overflow, If it's a positive number, it's going to be green. If it's a negative number, it's going to be red. You can change those as you like. Next, we'll take a look at how these drag and drop options work. So in this equip slot, for drag and drop to work in this manner, you need to have these set up for each equip point that you want to allow. And what I've done is I've got a background image for each of them that shows the user what kind of item is allowed there, and then a placeholder for the item image when something is equipped. And so for this, we add an equip point UI. We don't need to add an inventory cog. It will automatically be populated. Additionally, we could find it by tag if we wanted to, which I've done on other ones. And then we set the item icon and nothing else, because this is an equip slot, so we don't really need to know any details about the item. This skill drop slot is exactly the same as the skill UI, the skill slot UI that we use in the regular interface. They automatically support drag and drop, so as soon as something is dragged in here, it'll just refresh that. And as you saw, we can toggle between them, just like we did for manual equipping with a key or a button. And finally, in the grid, we have the item scroll grid, which we've seen set up before. And no real changes here over anything else that we've previously done. So this takes care of most of the major UI setup. In the next video, we're going to be looking at doing attachments and some different prompts and name changing, things like that. So I hope you will join me in the next video, and I will see you soon.